Okay guys, so by now you've all heard the unfortunate news that Black Clover will be going on a 3-month hiatus, coming back I believe at the end of July with the final arc of the series. Now, I'm going to get into more detail about what's going on with the final arc, or at least my prediction as to what's going on with the final arc. We have no clear-cut information on whether or not it's actually a final arc or a final saga, because there's been different translations. I'm going with final arc just because the source that I got that from is usually very reliable and very accurate with their details, but we'll talk about that at the end of the video. For now, let's jump into the chapter, which, again, because of how explosively popular the leaks were this week for this chapter, you guys probably already know pretty much what happens in the chapter and what the big reveal is, but there are some more details that we got from the translated text. Even though it's only the fan translation, we still get a little bit more details, a little bit more context to things. And one thing we actually find out about in this chapter near the end of it from the translation actually brings more context to the big reveal and might make us see things in a different light than we originally thought when we saw the leaks. So let's just jump right into the chapter. Okay, so let's get into the chapter. So starting off, we actually have Nock, who's actually the one who takes Yuno and reveals to him that his mother is actually alive. Now, this is actually kind of interesting because I didn't realize it was actually Nock who took him there, which I should have, because in the leaked images you can clearly see Nock there right behind him. So I should have been able to put two and two together. But what's really interesting to me is the fact that, and I haven't really gone back and confirmed this, even though I said it multiple times already that I should, but I could have swore in the anime, which is in continuity, even the filler parts is still in continuity with the manga continuity. I could have swore that when we saw the Spade Kingdom be destroyed or taken over by the Dark Triad, that both his mom and his dad were killed on screen by the Dark Triad. But I guess I was wrong this entire time. It turns out Seal was actually alive. Now, what's kind of annoying about this part of the chapter is that throughout the conversation between Yuno and his mom, which should have been very sweet, you know, a nice mother-son reunion after about 17 plus years, we unfortunately had the side characters from the Spade Kingdom, you know, Ralph, I believe his dad, or whoever the captain of the Spade Kingdom resistance is. We have them interjecting throughout the entire conversation between the two of them, trying to convince Yuno to come over to the Spade Kingdom permanently and become their next king, which, surprisingly, or not really that surprisingly, but he's actually kind of open to the idea a little bit, because he ends up saying in this chapter that the future is still uncertain, which is implying that he actually might be coming to the Spade Kingdom to become the king in the future. But as right now, he had made some vows, some promises to people in the Clover Kingdom that he wants to keep, mostly the promise to him and Asta, between him and Asta, on the two of them competing to become the next Wizard King, which I've always predicted that, especially since we got the idea, or the introduction to the idea, that Yuno is actually the prince of the Spade Kingdom, the rightful prince. I always said that once him and Asta have their final battle or their final competition to decide who's going to become the next Wizard King, obviously, unless Asta ends up dying in the final arc, there's no way he's not going to end up becoming the Wizard King, which means that once Yuno loses the title to him, he's going to come back to the Spade Kingdom and officially take it over as the next king of the Spade Kingdom. And I really like how Tabata, during Yuno's conversation with his mom, kind of mirrors the same thing with Lieb and Asta, where Asta confirms in this chapter in a one-on-one conversation with Lieb that he now knows, thanks to Lieb's memories, that Lucida was his mom. And even though he never hated her, it's nice knowing that she actually did love him and didn't just abandon him. So now the two of them can go forward as actual brothers. And on top of that, we have, again, mirroring the conversation at the end of it between Yuno and his mom, Asta saying to Lieb that he's going to become the next Wizard King. One thing Tabata's always done a great job of is showing the rivalry and the friendship between these two characters, so I'm actually looking forward to seeing what happens when the two of them actually finally had to sit down and decide who's going to become the next Wizard King. I'm hoping that we actually get to see a fight between the two of them, because I was actually very interested in seeing a fight go down. I mean, not so much now because Asta's very clearly a lot stronger than Yuno is, but if Yuno can get a major power up in this next arc and make the two of them more equal, I'm actually looking forward to seeing like a final fight, a final battle between the two of them that decides who's going to become officially the next Wizard King. If that is how you actually decide the process, we still have no idea, even this far into the series, exactly how the Wizard King is chosen. Now, one thing I want to mention before we get into the next part of the chapter is that Asta is actually sitting on top of the clock tower that we've been seeing multiple times throughout this last arc, especially the last final battle between Asta and the captains and Yuno versus Lucifero. Now, this is something that I never really picked up on, but apparently a lot of you guys out there have actually picked up on the fact that the time on the clock had actually been going backwards, or basically that it's been inconsistent between each chapter. And we kind of get a reveal in this chapter officially that the clock tower, the fact that it's showing different times, is actually a big important factor of the entirety of this arc and what's going to be happening in the future. Now, after we get done the two conversations, we head over back to the Clover Kingdom, and we get to see Marx having a conversation with Julius. And in Julius' inner monologue, he's actually, as you guys already know, basically contemplating what happened in the last arc and saying that something still isn't adding up because everything seemed to end too perfectly. And again, I'm assuming that you all already know because you probably already saw the spoilers because the leaks were massive this week and it was shared everywhere, even more so than the last week's chapter. But you already know that it gets revealed in this chapter that Julius is actually basically the fourth Zogritis brother and that he's connected to the Devil of Time, Astaroth. Which was such a heartbreak to find out in the leaks because Julius is one of my top 10 characters. He's one of the characters I really enjoy reading and I've always loved since the beginning of the series. And finding out that he actually was evil this entire time, that he's pretty much been the mastermind, like pretty much on his eyes and level bullshit since the beginning of the series, was definitely something that was very interesting to see. It was a nice plot twist, but as a fan of the character, I really did not want that to end up happening. But we end up finding out in this chapter that Julius might not actually be as evil as we originally thought. I actually think it's seemingly being presented to us that Julius is actually in a very Patrick William kind of situation where he's sharing one body with two different souls. Because in the reveal when Dominato, I believe that's how you actually pronounce it, but when he actually comes and confronts Julius about the entire thing, in the moments before he actually turns into the fourth Zogritis brother Lucius, we actually see Julius trying to warn Dominato about something. And it's very clear that he's actually really trying to warn him. He's not playing it off for a prank, he's not joking around. He is very easily and very clearly trying to give Dominato or Dominato a warning before he transforms and loses control of his body because he can tell it's happening right there in that moment. Now, here's my theory as to what's going on with this whole Julius situation. Alright, so going off the theory that a lot of fans have right now, which is actually pretty much in line with how the other siblings work, is that most likely Lucius Zogritis has the ability to manipulate minds, going along with the whole body magic aspect that the other siblings had. And obviously Astaroth, the Time Devil, has the time manipulation magic. That's where Julius's main abilities have come from throughout the series. Although, this does still bring up the question, alright, if Lucius' ability is to manipulate the mind, and Astaroth has the time magic, where did the transformation magic that we've seen Julius use throughout the entire series when he tried to be incognito and transformed into that old woman to go around town without being noticed, where did that ability come from? And what I'm thinking happened is that 20 years ago, and I'm just assuming that number because Dominato actually puts forward that number in his chapter, but I'm thinking that 20 years ago, at some point after Lucius and Astaroth made their contract and actually put forward this plan with Adramelech, I'm thinking that at some point, Lucius transferred his mind or his body or his soul or something like that over into Julius, who was a kid at the time, into his body, and then used his magic to manipulate his mind to think that his magic was always time magic, not transformation magic. Or that maybe he was born with both magic abilities, but either way, he was manipulated into believing that this entire time, and going forward, he was hiding in Julius' body until these certain events happened, which led to the death of Lucifero, so that he can gain his heart. Now, we still have no idea exactly what he wants to use the heart for. I can assume that he wants to gain the power from it in some way, shape, or form, but we had to wait until we come back from the 3-month hiatus to find out exactly what his plan is with that. Anyway, that's my main theory as to what's going on with the whole Julius and Lucius situation right now. I might be just wishful thinking because I like Julius so much and I don't want to see him actually end up being evil, but I think this chapter actually does confirm that Julius was not aware of everything until this very moment, and I don't think this is basically him turning tables or turning heel on us. I actually think in this moment right before he transformed into Lucius that he actually was about to warn Dominato about this whole situation and what he figured out in this very moment, but Lucius took over his body before he could do that. Which, speaking of Dominato, we actually see in this chapter Lucius do something to him because we see him pointing his fingers on his forehead, and then in the very next panel, or the very next page, we see Dominato on the ground. And some fans are thinking that he might be dead in this chapter, but I think that if Lucius' ability is to manipulate the mind, that he more likely just erased Dominato's memories in this moment and knocked him out, so that he wouldn't remember this whole conversation and what he figured out, so that Lucius won't be found out just yet. Because we see that his grimoire is still intact there, and if a character dies, the grimoire gets destroyed along with them unless it gets taken over by a devil. So, because his grimoire is not destroyed, we can tell that he's still alive. But anyway guys, that's pretty much all that happened in this week's chapter, which means unfortunately we're entering into the 3-month hiatus, so we won't begin the next chapter until possibly the end of July. Now, once we do come back from the hiatus, we're going to be entering into the final arc of the series, which, even though it is the final arc, could go on for another 3 to 5 years, so we still have a long time to go with Black Clover. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens when it comes back. But that's it for the video guys, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.